Hello, welcome to Virtuous Teacher. I'm your host, Ritchie Knox. And in this episode, we'll be talking about establishing a learning culture. All right, now before we get started, please check out the descriptions area for ways to connect and support me in my initiative. Let's jump in. All right, the very first thing is anticipating the terrible 10. For those people who don't know what the terrible 10 is, it's the first 10 minutes of every class. All right, within the first 10 minutes of every class, chaos is prepared to ensue. Your students are just walking in. You might have the bell ringing, the intercom going off, the phone might be ringing, the class phone might be ringing. You got some kids walking in late. The first 10 minutes is usually chaotic. Oftentimes, this is due to them coming from another class, being able to, walk the hallways, meet with friends, and now they're sprinting inside your classroom. All this stuff happens in the first 10 minutes, and you have to be ready. You have to anticipate it. There are ways to avert this situation, obviously having systems in place, like when you come to class, you sit here, you get this going, you take out this, pencil and paper, the bell work. Having systems in place does avert a lot of that terribleness in the first 10 minutes, but it doesn't get rid of everything, right? Another way to prepare for the first 10 minutes is not starting your lesson within the first 10 minutes. For example, I don't really start my lesson until about 15 minutes in the classroom. And in those first 10 minutes, what I'm doing is I'm taking attendance. I'm calling students who missed their last big assessment to the back of the class to take it. And I'm also accepting makeup work. Those three things can function with students coming in late, announcements going off, all that kind of stuff. And then once that time period settles, that first 10 minutes settles, we're ready for a very coordinated lesson plan and, complete silence, compliance type of mindset from the students and both myself. All right. So I would say those are a few things to utilize to avert that terrible 10 minutes to start the class. All right. And I guess another thing I'll throw in there is doing it this way. I should say starting your main lesson, your main course after the appetizer, after about 15 minutes. It allows you to address behavioral issues. A lot of times students will come in off the chain, cursing, all this stuff. Well, perfect. I'm not starting anything for about 10 to 15 minutes anyway. Perfect time for me to invite you to the classroom phone to call your parents and have your parents redirect you before we start the class. All right, amazing strategy. The next thing is classical music. Classical music is perfect for establishing a learning culture or a learning environment because the music is beautiful, it's sultry, it stimulates the mind. That is a scientific fact. Classical music stimulates the brain. It has no lyrics, and it often drowns out those terrible conversations that are distracting. Just as everything is kind of starting to groove, you know how students are within maybe 8 minutes of just perfect work time. They'll get restless, and now all of a sudden they're having conversations about Fortnite or something weird like that. And boom, you play that classical music via Pandora, via YouTube, or where you can get it from, or some kind of playlist, and it drowns out those distracting conversations and it engages everyone. I have not found someone who does not like to work with music playing. It's very calming, and it definitely contributes to a learning environment. All right, anyway, keeping it moving. The next thing is return work or give feedback. This strategy is seldomly used, but it's very effective. When you start to notice that your students are getting off track, or even if you just want to completely establish a learning culture, feedback is one of the best ways to do so. All right, feedback lets the student know what they're doing wrong. And in the situation in which you're starting to get students jump off task, that is the perfect time to go to the front of the class and say, hey, if there's anyone who would like feedback, or if you would like my help or assistance, hold your work up and I'll tell you right now. It's immediate feedback. Hey, so you're missing a comma right there. Hey, you forgot to indent. Hey, you forgot that exclamation mark. Hey, you need to add a circle to these type of things allow them to get immediate feedback that they can add to their work right there to improve it. It's amazing. Another form of feedback is giving answers back that you've corrected via a assessment. For example, maybe the class prior, they took a quiz, you've already graded it. And I know it is, a teacher's thing to give papers back immediately after you grade them. But I'm going to challenge you to hold on to it for maybe 1 to 2 classes and, kind of use it as a re-establishing tool. So as students are getting restless and some of those conversations are creeping up and maybe causing some disruptions, that's the perfect time to say, all right, the papers I'm passing back, these are your answers from quiz 2. I've already graded everything. If you have any questions, please let me know. And then you start passing those back. And what happens is the conversation switches from whatever drama was taking place in the hallway to, hey, did you pass the quiz, or what did you get for answer number 2? Oh, how did I get a 7 and you got an 8? How did that happen? They're now re-engaged with the class, and they're now re-engaged with the lesson. That is definitely a hack. All right, I use it all the time. I pass back papers, and sometimes I'll hold the paper for some time where they would have forgotten that they even turned it in. You know how kids are; they have these like instant memories, right? The minute they turn in an assignment, they don't even think about it anymore. But here is that portrait you did a whole week ago, and you have a score on the back. That's immediate, or not immediate feedback, but that is feedback, and it does encourage improvement. All right, so that's another thing you can do. The next thing is, as far as establishing a learning culture, this might be slightly controversial, but that is removing the mystery. All right, I'm gonna ask you a question. Here it is. Can you please name the primary colors? What are they? What are the primary colors? All right, so if you're a student in my class and you don't know the primary colors, a few things happen. You get a little nervous because you don't know the answer. And because you don't know the answer, your anxiety skyrockets because you're afraid that I might call on you and you might not know the answer. And if you don't know the answer in front of your peers, you can feel embarrassed. All right, but how do you remove the anxiety? Well, by revealing or removing the mystery. For example, can you please name the primary colors? Ooh, I don't know the primary colors. Oh, okay. Well, the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. All right, did you feel that weight get lifted off your chest? A lot of students are terrified in these classes because they know that they don't really know a lot, right? And we've all been there. We've been in the class. We've heard the teacher just rattling off all these things and questions. You're like, I just hope that this teacher does not call me. Well, you can ease a lot of that anxiety by just revealing the answers. Okay, hey, the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. All right, and in most cases, they'll write down the answer. Or they'll just remember it because you know what? That's pretty easy. Red, yellow, and blue. I can remember that. And you ask maybe 1 minute later, excuse me, just to ensure you were paying attention. Can you name the primary colors? And for all intents and purposes, that student might not have recalled it or retained that information. But by that point, you got like 4 or 5 hands raised up like, oh, I remember, I know it. And these are hands from students who didn't know it before you revealed the mystery or the answer or, remove the mystery. Okay, now you might be asking yourself, how do I maintain the rigor if I'm giving out the answers in this method? Well, it's very simple. You just, provide an assessment or take that same question and apply it to an assessment maybe a week later. So a week later, comes and, here we go, scholars, take out pencil and paper. I would like you for your quiz today to list the primary colors. That is how you remove the mystery, provide the answer, but still maintain the rigor by applying it or that particular question to an assessment. You're still required to know this information. I'm just going to give you the answer now to remove the mystery. Okay, when you're trying to learn something, whether it be in a classroom space, I'm talking about you, whether it be in a classroom space or whether it be how to put a bike together or how to put a dresser together, how do you like the answer to how to do so provided to you? Do you like to look under rocks and read dictionary books and pull up 14 different sources to find the answer? Or do you just want the answer given to you by way of an instructor, a YouTube video, or a manual? I'm going to go with the more common answer, I'm sure. You just like the answer given to you, but you don't want there to be a mystery as to why something needs to be done or how you do something. And I know that because Google is so popular. You know how many questions Google gets per day? Right? Now imagine if you type in your question into Google and they make you go through all these different sequences in order to find the answer. No. You know what Google does? They remove the mystery and they give you the answer. And that's how people learn. Okay, so remove the mystery. It definitely removes the anxiety within the classroom space. All right, next is simplify instructions. If you want to establish a learning culture, one of the biggest things you have to learn to do is simplify instruction. You have to take all your years of college and all your knowledge and all these complex constructs and all this content and simplify it so simple that even a caveman or a cavewoman can freaking learn it. All right. Even a 3-year-old or 4-year-old can take, whatever you're teaching and apply it because they understand it. That is one of the most effective things you can do. And this concept is supported by none other than Einstein. I believe it was him who said that if whatever you're teaching can't be understood by a 3-year-old or a small child, then you don't understand the content well enough yourself. And I really believe that. I really do. If you can't break it down and teach it in these very simple ways, then perhaps you need to relearn it so that you can. All right. I really believe that. And of course, simplified instruction certainly removes anxiety. All right. Next, don't belabor poor behavioral choices. Now, let's say you have 100% of students in your class, and maybe 1 to 2 students are the only 2 of the students in your class causing issues. And I would say one of the worst things you can do is to ignore the 95% of students on task and give all your time and attention to those 2 students that's misbehaving. And let's go ahead and talk about the obvious thing. Usually, students misbehave because their attention deficit, or they're not receiving attention at home, or they're used to getting attention, and for whatever reason they're not getting enough, whether it be at home or in the classroom space. So usually they'll act out in order to get attention. And one of the worst things you can do is take your attention off the lesson, off the learning, off establishing the learning culture, and take all your energy and give it into these 2 students for behavioral issues. Yes, you do address everything, large and small, all problems, all disrespect. You address it. I do believe that. But I don't think that you belabor it. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. Let's say a cell phone goes off in your class, and this actually happened today in my classroom. I already have a procedure for this entire process. I give a warning. I say, please, everyone, or whoever's phone that is, please put it on silent. And that usually handles the situation about 90% of the time. Okay, so notice that I'm not going to belabor the situation or the cell phone. I certainly don't police cell phones. I don't have time to do that. But as far as cell phones are concerned in my classroom space, I tell my students, your cell phones must be on silent. If you want to take them out and use them as resources, so be it. But I know if your cell phone is a problem or if it is a resource based on if I can hear it. If I can hear it, it's not a resource. It's a problem within the space. So this is how it would probably play out. Some student, looking to get some attention might play a lyric from a song. That happened today, by the way. I'll say this. I said this. Whoever's cell phone it is, please put it on silent. Thank you. 3 seconds. That's it. I'm not going to spend too much time on the cell phone. I'm moving on. The end. All right. So don't belabor bad behavioral choices. Get back to that 95% that's ready to learn, because the last thing you want to do is turn your classroom into a theater. All right. Where you're going back and forth with the troublemaking student who has bad intentions. You don't want that problem. You want to address the situation and get back to learning. The next thing is be fearless. All right, be prepared and willing to destroy your learning culture if you have to. Let me explain. Now, if you're having issues in your classroom, or you have a student that is just, very, very focused on disrupting your classroom space, you have only 2 choices. Either allow that student to destroy your learning culture, or be prepared to do it yourself. At least if you do it yourself, the instructions or how to bring it back together. So therefore, if you destroy it, you know how to get it back on pace. Okay, so be willing to destroy your class yourself. Now, I gave you a story that happened today about a cell phone. And I didn't tell you this, but it's way more elaborate. Way more happened. So let me give you the actual story. The cell phone goes off. I address it very quickly. And I'm thinking that's it. All right. Because again, 90% of the time, just me asking the students to put their cell phone on silent, and not even asking the student who does it, but just in general, I need all scholars to put your cell phones on silent. That usually handles the situation. But in this case, we were dealing with someone who was really determined. So within 5 seconds, the music comes back on. And I'm noticing that it is, pretty disruptive lyrics and things like that. So at that point, I can imagine that the student who did that was expecting another verbal warning. But I had already made up in my mind that I am prepared to destroy my classroom culture for this issue, because this issue is already starting the process of destroying my classroom culture. So I get up, I go to the area where I hear the music, and there's only two young ladies in that particular vicinity. And I say, whose cell phone keeps going off? They don't say anything at all, right? But then I have one student point to a sheet of paper that's not a part of the two students, by the way. And I lift the paper up, and there's the cell phone. I said, ladies, whose cell phone is this? All right. And they look at each other and they don't say anything at all. Ha. Okay, fine. I take the cell phone. I put it in my pocket. I said, whoever's cell phone this is, you need to retrieve it from me. And when you do come and get your cell phone from me, I will be calling your parents to let them know how you're using your cell phone in the classroom space. All right. And when I sit down, the funniest thing happens. They're going back and forth like, he was going to say that, or you took the cell phone, and why did you push the button? And then you have another person chiming in saying, you might as well just go ahead and tell them. You're going to get in trouble anyway. You might as well just go ahead and face the music. It's just crazy, right? So I'm sitting there quietly as if I'm re-engaged with my work, but I'm watching this entire theater or play out, and I eventually figure out everything I need to figure out. So I called the two young ladies to my desk. I said, young lady, is this your cell phone? Yes. I said, are you the one that's playing the music? Now, I already know the answer, but I just want to, give them the opportunity to, say what they have to say. She says, no, it wasn't me. It was her. I said, okay, no problem. Both of you, call your parents. All right. So at this point, I'm prepared to destroy the lesson. I'm prepared to destroy the classroom culture. Why? Because I have to make a very strong stand, a very strong point that I will not tolerate disrespect to the learning culture. And though this situation did last between maybe 5 to 15 minutes, I can guarantee you this, it will never happen again. And I'll tell you why. Because for the young lady who owned the cell phone, I called her parents to tell her, your child is allowing other people to use her cell phone to play inappropriate music. Now, I know the game, and I know this parent's going to be highly upset that this very expensive device that she purchased her child for safety reasons is being used inappropriately and also in the hands of another person. Checkmate. And then I called the other young lady's parents. I said, your daughter is using someone else's cell phone to play inappropriate lyrics that are disruptive to the environment. And this creates an issue there, because now it's like, wait a minute, my child is, what did they get a cell phone from? Or why are they listening to that in the classroom? And I was very explicit. I didn't use the direct terminology, but I gave the parent a good idea of what the lyrics were. And I did so in a way that was still respectful to the environment. All right. So, but it was direct and very clear as to what the lyrics were talking about. But I just didn't use the exact verbiage. Okay. So the point is, both students are now looking at each other. She's mad because she's going to get in trouble about allowing someone to use her cell phone. The other one's mad because she told me that she was the one who pushed the button that played the music. And there you have it. The classroom culture is pretty much over. Or is it? Because those two young ladies go back to their seat. They're extremely quiet now because they just had their parents call in the middle of everyone. And now the class is back rolling. And guess what? Moving forward, I'll never have a cell phone go off in that class again, because they already understand what the consequences are. Okay? That's how it works. And yes, sometimes you will have to sacrifice maybe 5 to 10, 15 minutes in your classroom to establish long-term comfort. It just happens. It just is what it is. But you have to be fearless. You have to be willing to stop everything. Everything must cease for the learning environment, for the learning culture. Even if it has to happen, for 10 minutes at a time, 15 minutes at a time. It won't be that way every time. Trust me when I say that. I've done this several times. All right, the next thing I would like you to do, if you would like to establish a culture for learning, is to be busy yourself. Well, one of the best things you can do to establish and maintain a positive culture within your classroom is to be busy. All right, here's some examples of what I mean by being busy. You can be busy providing feedback to other students. You can be busy grading papers or assessments, or you can be busy doing your own projects. If you're still a student in maybe graduate school, you can, be doing your own homework after you've already established what the lesson is and you've already, provided feedback and helped everyone with their questions, and you just have some downtime. Start doing something academic, because that will translate into your scholars, right? I would say anytime you're writing, with your hand, pen, paper, writing, or typing, you look extremely busy. And when you look busy, it is very, very inspiring to your students. I would absolutely recommend this. All right. Students work when you're working. That's how I like to put it. The next thing is be ready. Have the class perfectly charted out by using notes and a setup in which you already know how everything is aligned and how every part of your classroom is structured. For example, my classroom runs like this. We do attendance. I give opportunities to turn in makeup work. I call students who were absent the prior class to the back of the class to take the quiz that they missed. I provide the homework assignment for the week. Then we move into the lesson. Then I provide work time, and then we clean up. That is how my class is structured every day, give or take a few things based on what happened in prior class. And no matter what happens, if a cell phone goes off, if this happens, if that happens, I'm able to get right back on track because I am extremely consistent in the way that my classroom runs. So, a kid can come in late. It doesn't matter. I'll mark them tardy and get right back to explaining what the homework assignment is for the following class because I do it every class. It's become muscle memory at this point. All right. So you have to be prepared. Be ready. Be ready for behavioral issues. That way you're not caught off guard. You're not reactive. Instead, you're proactive. You already anticipated having disruptions in the classroom. So when it happened, you wasn't overly expressive. You was like, okay, all right, well, I saw this coming a mile away. Let's handle it. Let's do it. I'm prepared to press that red button. But of course, if you can handle the situation without pressing the red button, even better. All right. Now, let me go back just a little bit. All right. I want to make sure I address something that just popped up in my mind. In one instance, I say don't belabor behavioral issues. But in the next instance, I'm saying be prepared to, be fearless, be prepared to press the red button and disrupt your own culture. Well, what's the difference? How can you disrupt your own culture or spend 15 minutes addressing a phone situation if you're not belaboring behavioral choices? Well, I think it's simple. Now, notice the first time I heard the sound from the cell phone, I just said, hey, everyone, all students, put your cell phones on silent. That wasn't belaboring the situation. That was simply addressing. Now, where you have to actually spend time and be prepared to disrupt your own culture is when you have to say the same thing more than one time. All right. You're not belaboring it by addressing it quickly, maybe the first or second time. But once you realize that that student is not getting a hint, they're not complying, they're not listening, that's when you have the permission to be prepared to disrupt your own culture for just a moment. All right, because maybe that first or that second strike just wasn't enough for them to latch on to what you were trying to do. You're just trying to give them a break and address the situation at the same time. Well, like I said, if it happens a third or fourth time, well, I would argue that the culture is already in danger, but by the student who has no intent of, giving up or allowing the classroom to get back on the rails. So at that particular point, you say, you know what? Fine, let's do it. And you shut things down and get it back on track. Do what you have to do. Whatever you do, make sure that that student gets the consequence that they're so badly desiring. All right. For me, it was kind of funny when I called the parents. I'm like, wait, so y'all wanted this? I gave you the very easy opportunity to put the cell phone on silent and move on with life, but you wanted this consequence. You wanted me to call your parents and tell them that you're listening to that in class. You wanted me to call your parents and have them, find out that you're letting someone use your cell phone. You wanted that. And I realized that was the first time that I had went that far. So they didn't even know that was a possibility. But I know for now, moving forward, they're going to already know, like, you know what? I know what he's capable of. He'll call parents. He'll stop his class. He doesn't care that he's going to take time out the lesson, because I know how important that moment was for the rest of the school year. All right. Because most students are going to think twice, like, you know what? He just gave me a warning. He just, gave me a verbal warning. And I can't promise that he's going to give me a second verbal warning. All right. Sometimes you got to be spontaneous like that. All right. And be prepared and be ready and be fearless as it relates to destroying your own culture. I know it sounds bad, but trust me, that same class for the rest of the school year will not give me any problems of that magnitude, especially as it relates to a cell phone. All right, the next thing is don't be hypersensitive. All right, let the small fries burn. What do I mean by that? As you're giving out instructions and you see a smile. Sometimes a smile can set off a teacher. Sometimes a small conversation can set off a teacher. Sometimes a ringer from a cell phone can set off a teacher. Don't be hypersensitive. Allow some of this stuff to pass. Let small fries burn. I'll give you the perfect example that correlates to some of the examples I've already used in this episode. Sometimes while I'm teaching, I'll hear a ringer go off, and I'm thinking to myself, that happens. Sometimes the student forgot to put their phone on silent, or they kept their phone on, and they don't usually get calls at this time, so they really wasn't anticipating it. And a phone will go off, and I'll see the child scrambling to try to put it on silent. I don't even address it because I know it's a mistake, and I know it can happen to anybody. And I can always feel that child, their anxiety just come down like, all right, Mr. Knox. He wasn't even tripping about that, He could have said something. He didn't even say anything because I recognized that you were panicked, which means you didn't expect it. And I recognized that you were frantically trying to put it on silent. And I recognized once it was on silent, you kind of looked at me. And I said, you know what? Got it. All the nonverbal cues were picked up, and we're not going to address this and be hypersensitive and create a class of commotion over something that was clearly a mistake. All right. Or sometimes you'll have students talking to someone. You hear the conversation. You hear that it is based on the lesson that you're teaching. I don't stop and say, stop talking while I'm giving out I don't do that because I know that they're trying to figure it out amongst themselves. And I encourage that. So I'm not going to be hypersensitive. Yes, address everything, but don't be hypersensitive, because what could happen is when students know that you're hypersensitive, they'll definitely do things on purpose to set you off. All right. I think that the young ladies who played the music today were not necessarily doing it because I am hypersensitive, but it's because most other teachers, once they hear the cell phone go off, they go off. And they're now just like on a whole different planet, and they're screaming, they're mad. And most times that teacher is screaming, mad, doing all this stuff, and they're not even calling the parent at the end. It's just a whole bunch of screaming that takes time from the lesson and destroys the culture. Well, with me, I'm not going to scream at all. I'm going to talk in this tone, but the consequences are going to be absolutely pivotal or impactful, right? I'm going to talk to you as calm as I'm talking now, as I'm calling you to the desk to call your parents, because I'm not going to be hypersensitive, and I'm definitely not going to be over emotional. Okay. So those are just a few pointers or things you can take away that will instantly improve the learning culture in your classroom. All right. I hope this video was helpful. And if so, please throw a like on the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.